Hello and welcome to another Top Advisor Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Halloran. Now, this is part two of our two-part, potentially three-part mini-series to talk a little bit about your influence marketing strategy. Now, the last one that we did, we laid the foundation. Kirk and I talked about all of the different things that you need to do to build a very, very strong foundation when it comes to your brand, your language, your techniques, your systems, your thought leadership. And now we're going to switch gears and talk about how you start this escape velocity. So we use the rocket analogy here a lot. Right now, you have built this incredible foundation that when your rocket starts to go off into the air and really you ignite the engines, it doesn't blow your entire foundation. We built that foundation last time. Now is when we're going to start having you ignite your engines and start going up into space. And of course, it takes time. That rocket sits there for a little bit of time before it starts taking off. But the farther it goes and the higher it gets, the easier it is, which we talk a lot about that when it comes to escape velocity. So Kirk, we're going to dive right into how do you light these fires? Because it's not just one thing, it's lots of things.
Yes, absolutely. So momentum is everything. And just like the rocket analogy, you have to achieve escape velocity to start pushing through the atmospheres and Earth to get to weightlessness. Weightlessness is that place where you're a celebrity influencer in your niche. And that's what, ultimately you can get to. But a lot of people are good with what we call the third stage of influence, which is authority. Mm-hmm. And authority is where everybody sees you as that in your niche audience and your region. And those are powerful things. So we've gone through the first 11, like Matt said, those are foundational things. If you don't have those things in place, it's very hard for these other things to really work. You can do them, but they're not nearly as effective. And that's why content, part of a content strategy or an influence strategy, is everything. You have to have that role, and it has to be good, has to be authentic. You got to put the time in. You can't show up and half-ass, right? What do you got to do, Mr. Halloran?
You got a whole asset.
You got a whole asset, baby. We're getting t-shirts at one of these points for that. We just haven't gotten there yet. So expand. So now that you've got this foundation rolling, you got to be good at it and steady, consistent. The next thing to do is start hosting webinars, as an example. And webinars are great because they're so efficient. Mm-hmm. I don't know that they've taken over for seminars, but I'm sure they're running neck and neck. If anything, we'll just keep it there. And they're both really important, but webinars are so convenient. I would say that a cadence is one of the most important things with a webinar, and getting into details, share checklists, share tools, tips, stuff like that. That's what we do on ours. Mm-hmm. And Matt and Jessica are really offering a lot of value. If you never hung out on any of our webinars, we do 2 a month. And that's a good cadence. Easy to replicate, keep it consistent. What you don't want to do is start off big and then slow down if you can help it. So try to do base those on, from time to time, a blog or a podcast, but get into more details, maybe show some examples, because now you got the value of it being visual, unlike a podcast. So get into some details, show some examples. Those can be really good things to differentiate what you're doing. Invite followers on your social channels, email everybody, and try to get as relevant an audience as you can, and be clear about who this webinar is for. Sometimes it can be for different parts or segments of your niche audience too. Mm-hmm. So for instance, we typically work with RIAs, financial advisors, fintech, stuff like that. Sometimes we're going to be doing a lot more in the future with marketing assistants. So we want to make sure we're clear that this is for marketing assistants, not for advisors, although they can come and figure out, what we're teaching marketing assistants anyway. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that was number 12, hosting webinars. So get good at that. Make sure you are consistent with it. If you want to boost it, those are options for you too. So run some ads to get more people there, but gauge that. But you should be able to get 20 to 50 people signing up on a regular basis for those. And those are good numbers. If you can steadily have those people, that's good. If you can go above that, excellent. Yeah. There are some larger partners that we do webinars with, and we've had as many as 500 or 600. Those are great. Those are great and very successful webinars. They don't happen all the time. but it is good to find partners you can do them with who can market to their base as well, and bring some exciting new people to your world. Number 13 is email automation. So set up email sequences. When you set up email sequences, you want to make sure that they're relevant to what somebody's interest was, unless they're just signing up for an email newsletter, in which case you're going to be sharing your thought leadership, what's going on. The more simple, we find the more simple they are, the more engagement we get. So we've tested doing really extensive with a ton of value.
Yeah.
Those take a lot of time. They're not any, they're not, we don't feel like they're worth it. It's better off a lot of times to get one, maybe two things, have a simple call to action, be really clear about it, and get people at least to read that one thing versus trying to get them to engage in a much larger commitment, which may take them half hour to get through. So try to do that as much as you can. The sequences, if you can, should be also based on what somebody, like I said, what somebody signed up for. If they signed up for a white paper, for example, break down that white paper and tools and resources and facts and stats, or whatever you can to give them more and more. And then maybe call them back to a webinar if that's successful. It could have been you led with the webinar and that white paper was, who knows. But usually you want to get the lead magnet to drive your own audience, which is getting their email address, which is really important. Don't ever think that email is not important. It's more important than social media. Okay. Because you control that list. Nobody can ever take that away from you. LinkedIn shuts you down. You're done. You just lose, you just lost all your followers until you can beg them and pay them lots of money to get back in or whatever you have to do. Never been shut down. So yeah. So email automation is important, and you might want to hire somebody to help out with that. I think the first thing everybody thinks of is going to chat to AI and trying to figure out email sequences. You got to be really careful about how you add value there. So unless you can have a really great prompt and feed it some good content to break down, you're not going to get much quality there. So be really careful about how you choose to draft those, and make sure you got a good system. Make sure you got a system that can trigger and automate your email. Okay. Number 14 is niche association engagement. Matt's got a great example of this, but the idea is that when you join a relevant association for your ideal audience, you've got a great opportunity to meet lots of people. The thing you want to do here is you don't want to come flying into an association acting like you're going to get a bunch of business. What you want to do is be the most helpful person in town. That's your key. And it could take you 6 months to a year for that to really happen. Maybe it takes even longer, but you got to be willing to pay your dues in those places and be so valuable that people want to talk about you and know that you're not here for the wrong reasons, which is just to do business with everybody without adding any value to the group, because associations are all about adding value. So you got to be a leader and add value. Can you share? You got a great example of that.
Yeah. So Brian Haney, who was on the panel when I was moderating the panel at MDRT, he is a member of the National Association of Association Executives. I might not have that entirely correct, but basically what it is he is on this board with all of these other association executives. And he doesn't focus on the associations. He just focuses on the executives who run the associations. So talk about niche within a niche. But here's the thing. Every time there's a new president, he brings them on his show and he does webinars and educational things. But he's even gotten it to the point now, he's been doing this for years, like 7 years. He wrote part of the test for the certification. So Kirk, everything that you just said is so vitally important that you have to put in your time. You're looking at 24 to 36 months before you can really start asking for business. Now, will you get business ahead of time? Absolutely. But they're going to feel you out, and they want to make sure any of these associations, any of these niches want to make sure that you're not going to be a fly-by-night person and come in and try to sell stuff and then leave.
Absolutely. So, take that to heart and approach everything the way that we're talking about. If you can't commit like that, then maybe following that is not for you.
Right.
And remember that if you don't have the time, or, it's really hard to be a great content marketer if you don't want to be generous about the time in. Let's be honest. Everybody wants a shortcut. The time when you realize there are no shortcuts is when your marketing is going to take off. Yeah. So number 15 is social posting on your personal brand or your personal life. You have to be careful here, but I know, for instance, there's definitely a push to more personal side of business and sometimes just purely personal. People always tie it back in, which is great and I think valuable, but there's definitely more. One of my most successful posts was me with my two youngest kids, and we were at a Merrimatic Lake, which is a lake that cold water, and the top, the entire depth of the water is all the exact same temperature. It's really cool. There's only 80 of them, I think, in the world, and it's not too far from our home. And I talked about being there and getting away. I'm sure I tied in business. I don't remember right now, but that post did really well. And sometimes, so I think Matt has a formula of 4-to-1 that he thinks is the best, and I agree with him. So think about that. So 4 business-oriented value posts to 1 personal post. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that means once a week. We don't get to that level because I don't get it done, but we definitely
truth comes out.
You make an effort. Yeah, we're probably do one every 2 weeks, once a month.
Yeah.
So probably maybe 8-to-1. But it's a really good idea to consider how people want to know who you are, what you do, because they need to relate to you. This is all pretty obvious stuff, so I won't go anymore. But the 4-to-1 is a good rule. I end up doing 8-to-1. I don't know what you do.
I do 4-to-1. So I'm very strict to the 4-to-1. Now the 4-to-1 was the goal. We didn't get there right away. It actually took a little while for us to get there. So
I think the other thing too is we're a little more prevalent on LinkedIn, and the rule there is it's a little bit lighter because it's less personable on LinkedIn typically, but it is changing, and I think it's a good dynamic. If people go too personal, then I think people may be more likely to shut that off. It really depends on your audience and what you're doing. Some people's entire thing is based around that, and they do really well with it. One of our clients, Larry, right? He does an amazing job, basically talking about finding joy every day. I personally don't know where he's getting all these posts from. The guy must just live, he's got
a full-time marketing person, which actually is Denise's wife.
I know, and he's having fun every day.
He is. Well, this
he calls it joy.
Yeah, that's a balance thing, dude, and it's really intentional. I can't wait for you to meet him, man. He is just such a nice guy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. I've been following him more and more, and it's unreal how dedicated he is to his brand and to being who he says he is, which is finding joy every day. And it sounds like him and his kids and his wife are having a lot of fun. So congratulations. That's a great thing. So those are the expand. Now we're going to talk about other people's podcasts, and Matt is definitely an expert on this, so he's going to.
So this is the second level of expansion, right? So what we talked about with Kirk is the internal expansion of what you can do within your own book of business, your own lists, in your own niches. Now we're going to talk about what you can do to get on other people's shows. So step number 1 is for you to look at where your ideal client goes to, like shows that they listen to, not what you want to necessarily do. And I'll give you an example. I just interviewed Tom Schwab from Interview Valet, and advisors will come in and say, well, I want to be on CNBC. No, advisors watch or listen to CNBC's podcast. You need to find a podcast that talks to your ideal client. And one of the examples that he gave was a Fitness Over 40, because if you are a financial services professional or a person who provides advice who really wants to attract that audience, fitness minded, successful people over 40, then you need to be on that show, not CNBC. So what you want to do is you want to create a hot list, right? You all used to do this when you were early on in your career with sales. Here are my top 10 prospects, top 20 prospects. We want you to do that for 20 podcasts. You have to write these down, and you have to say how many episodes they have, who is the host. And then your system is you're going to, one, subscribe to those shows, and two, start interacting with their posts. So when they post on social media about the show, you need to start commenting. They start seeing you. And then when you ask to get on the show, it works. You also want to promote their show. So if there was an episode of, Fitness Over 40 that you absolutely loved, repost that sucker on your social. I loved this episode. Here's what I loved. It's just, again, showing support for shows you want to be on. And then after being a guest, we have a rule here that if you're going to be a guest on our show, you have to agree ahead of time that you're going to share that show with your entire audience. You want to do the same thing for the shows that you're a guest on. Share it far, share it wide, send it to your email address, talk to your clients about it. All of those things are super, super important. Engaging anything that you can possibly engage with on social media, especially after they post. So the goal is so when I'm on another person's podcast, I tag that person in that podcast of our post here at ProudMouth. Then hopefully that host interacts with the post, and that gives me an opportunity to, again, start interacting with that host. It's all about the traffic, and it's all about the social communication. And then I'm going to dive just a little bit more deeply into the 4-to-1, if you don't mind, Kirk, because I think there's a lot of times too that you can use an OPP strategy for your own personal life. So Larry is a wonderful example. We'll use Larry Sprung again. It's the Midland Money podcast. And his whole thing is, what did you do today that brought you joy? He's a huge hockey guy. And so he's been on hockey podcasts talking about hockey, and he's got a couple of kids who play pretty competitive hockey, and how he also has this thing about what rink is he at today. And, you guess the rink, he'll donate X amount of money to your favorite charity. This is how all of this stuff starts really working together. And an OPP strategy can be really, really powerful for you to hit that next engine that you're igniting to continue that rocket going up into the air.
So now we're going to talk about, or Matt's going to talk about, how to be proud of your show. And this is something that seems so obvious, but you have to, when you have your own show, so whether, podcast and video, being proud of it and talking about it can be one of the most important things. Because if you don't, the people who are most likely to start spreading the love and cheer, about it, are the people that are going to think it's not for them, or you don't care about it, or you're not proud of it. So take it away.
Yeah, dude, it just blows me away. I'll be in office hours or Ask an Expert with our clients, and I will ask them, how often are they talking about their show in client meetings? And they still, they're clients of ours, and they still don't do it. And I'm like, look, you have to put it on your agenda. It's really, really important. Because if you don't show that you're excited about it, then nobody else is going to be excited about it. I don't know. I've heard objections, Kirk. Yeah. Matt, it makes me sound salesy, but you're not selling anything. You're giving something away for free, and it's your personality and your expertise. Yeah. It's not a sales thing. So
I think the new wave of advisors doing content marketing really get it.
Yeah.
I think it's the generation that's been marketing for a decade or two that have had experiences where I hire you to do my marketing for me, so I'm not going to do anything. But I can tell you that the younger generation, maybe a little bit less experience, are so hungry, and they are absolutely killing it. They do all the right. They're just soaking everything up that we say, whether it's in our academy or becoming a client of our managed service. It's really fun to see.
Yeah.
And I think that's exciting about this industry. But I think if you've been around for a couple decades and you're trying to do a set it and forget it, and you're not involved, you are going to find out the hard way that you should have been paying more attention, and you should, Gary Vaynerchuk said this, I think a decade ago, that every company now is a media company.
Yep.
And if you don't know how to do media and content marketing, you are really going to struggle. And we're already seeing that enough financial companies, right? Organic growth for RIAs has been non-existent for 5 years. There's been all kinds of talk about it. It's one of the most talked about, organic growth topics in that space. And why is that? I think it might relate to exactly what we just talked about. Mm-hmm. So anyway, keep flowing here, because there's how do you show pride in your show, and keep pride isn't just about talking about it. It's about coming prepared to be generous and valuable.
Well, and preparation, right, is such a huge component. I think the more prepared you are, and you know that you did a good show, the higher probability it is that you're going to be proud of it. So the number one thing that you have to do is you have to make sure that you're actually writing a show or doing a show that's applicable to your ideal client. And the best way to do that is to make sure that you are just keeping on top of reading, not always reading what's going on in the markets, which is what a lot of you do. But when you pick that niche that we talked about in the first, part of this 2, 3, 4, 5 part miniseries that we're working on right now, is that what your niche is looking for, what they want, what they need, and that's what your content's going to be. When you're sitting in a client meeting, when a client says something about their niche, or let's say an investment management strategy like a Roth conversion, what you need to say is, hey, look, you know what? I did a really deep dive on this in a 3-part mini series on our podcast. Are you subscribed to our podcast yet? No, I haven't meant to do that. Well, grab your phone real quick. Let's go ahead and get you subscribed. I'm going to show you where the Roth conversion mini series is, but I'm still going to answer for it today. But listen, I understand that you're not going to remember everything that I say today because we cover a lot. Please go back and listen to that episode or those episodes. That is absolutely huge. You also always have to send everything that you're doing to your email list. This is that owned audience that Kirk and I are talking about. Kirk just talked about it at the top. Listen, if LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram shuts down, you don't have those people. You don't own them. You own your email list. Please, please make sure that you are constantly emailing people. And with your niche or your centers of influence, they need to be on those lists too, because you're going to be providing them with wonderful pieces of information.
Sorry, it's not just that those, just going back to the idea of owned audience, and we're creating a little bit of fear for you there, that it's not as so much that they might shut you down as much as it is they change their algorithms, and all of a sudden you were getting all kinds of visibility and engagement, and then all of a sudden you're not, and you're not doing anything different. They've just changed something. You got to figure it out. So in between that happening, you have a lot more control over email. Not complete control, because spam and all that kind of stuff. So you gotta work hard to be only to communicate with people who want to be communicated with, because that really drives up your acceptance. Mm-hmm. Anyway, back to this. Just wanted to make sure people didn't think it was this drastic thing that was the real risk. There's all kinds of other risks in there, or a couple.
You just made it even scarier for him, dude. But I absolutely agree with you. So when you do come out with new content, and that content is applicable to a meeting you might have had 3 weeks ago, email that client and say, hey, Mrs. Johnson, I don't know if you remembered, but we talked about, I'm going to use Roth conversions again. Roth conversions. Hey, I just did a show about it. This might even help you make a more informed decision. That's really important.
Yeah. That's where having those great CRM systems where you're really dedicated to your team. Look, we just talked about these 4 things. Just put the keywords in there, and then you could look for those keywords and say, anybody who we talked about this with, send them that episode.
The number one thing that clients don't like about their advisors is they don't feel like they're getting personalized communication enough. And Kirk, that is the solution. And this is why this is so, I don't like using this word very much, but it's so holistic, because it has so many applications, not just for you to bring in new business, but client communication and retaining assets, getting greater share of wallet. It's really, really, really powerful. All right, I'm going to blow through a couple of these real quick, and then I'm going to switch it back over to you. The other thing that I want you to do is promote, right? So this is that be your own loud, be proud of what you're doing, ProudMouth, right? Which is the name of our company, which we named specifically because we wanted you to be proud of the content that you create. you have to talk about it. And in fact, I was hanging out early on, it was probably 2 or 3 years ago, before COVID actually, that an advisor, when they would go to networking events, she would say that she was a professional podcaster, and people would be like, what, you make a living with podcasting? No, I don't make a living with podcasting, but that's what I do. I love to educate the general public. And so she would lead, instead of saying I'm a financial advisor, or I sell insurance, or I'm a wealth manager or a financial planner, she would lead with the fact that she was a podcaster, which kept the conversation going. So wait a second. So you actually podcast on financial topics? Well, not just financial topics. You know, we talk about what life is like in blankety blank, niche, whatever. Right. And she was like, Matt, I get so much more engagement, and I get people to sign up for my show. But yes, I am a financial advisor. It's just such a different way to communicate who you are and what you do and what makes you unique and different with your elevator pitch, instead of just saying, you know, well, I help people live the retirement dreams that they've always wanted. Man, they probably heard that a million times.
Yeah. But if you could tie in a really interesting hook or niche and what you do for that niche, and then that's what I talk about in my podcast.
Yep.
You get both accomplished, and they're not easy. But what you just said, if they've heard it a million times, then you got to figure something else out to say.
Yeah.
And that's where a podcast can be. Oh, that's interesting. You have a podcast. Some people say stuff like, oh, everybody's got a podcast. That is not true.
That's so not true.
That is not true. And most of them, if they say they have a podcast, they probably should say, well, I had a podcast, or I'm probably not going to have one for long, because 90% of them are done before 10 episodes. So,
well, and it's not a good show, and they're not prepared. Yeah. And again, this is that whole pride thing. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I think a lot of advisors in our audience don't do with their shows is they don't ask for audience engagement. So here's another example. The keyword search that you were talking about within your CRM, I send you a social media post, I send you a blog, I send you an email, right? Or I send you a link to the podcast. Part of your CTA isn't to just listen to the show. Listen, I'd love for you to like, share, and comment on this. It's okay to ask people to do that, because if we start getting more and more audience engagement, that's going to please the algorithm and get it even higher. But the flip side of that is when somebody does comment on your posts, from the long form content creation turned into short form stuff, you have to comment back. The first line of my first book, the Social Media Handbook for Financial Advisors, has to do with the fact that it's social media. It's back and forth. If you're just screaming into the void, social media doesn't care. It's all about the interaction. And then last but not least, I want to touch on is get out there, have your podcast or your show. I actually like calling it a show a little bit more. Your show, sponsor a local team. It shouldn't be Kirk Lowe's financial practice. It should be the Top Advisor Marketing Podcast sponsors, the AAA hockey team. Or that's the sort of stuff that makes a huge difference. Get more visibility to the content that you create, so people can start building a relationship with you before you start asking them to do business with you. So Kirk, I know there's a couple other things in this list, but I want to stay true to time here, and I want you to wrap up with
You skipped two things.
Well, I know I did, but we're going to run out of time, dude. Do you just want to
get them done, dude? Okay. I'm not letting our audience down.
Okay. All right. That's fine. Okay. So guest expert. I love the guest expert. This is actually a huge thing that I have. That's kind of part of my whole job here, is when I'm on other people's podcasts, I am there to become a guest expert. I'm an expert on podcasting, performance, on client communication, on client retention, influence, obviously, how to accelerate. The big thing that I'm starting to talk more about is this great wealth transfer, and how are you going to get Gen X and millennials attention? I'm getting a lot of bites on that. Now, it's a content marketing strategy, but you got to have that hook. You have to have that hook. One of my favorite hooks that I actually heard at MDRT again was an advisor who says, I work with broke doctors. And well, you're a financial advisor. Yeah. So early on in a doctor's, educational journey, they're broke, right? They're not making any money. They're accruing all of this debt. My job is to prepare so when they get that first big paycheck, that we can use that really wisely. And so he speaks at medical schools, and he speaks at residency programs, and he speaks at postdoc programs. And I mean, this guy is the guest expert. When you have a niche, you can start seeing how all of these doors open. So many of you think when you have a niche, the doors close, but they don't. Doors just open and open. And then the last thing is, which, man, I don't understand why more of you don't do this, but you have to optimize your Google My Business. Listen, it's going to be there if you like it or not. If you have a physical address, Google My Business is going to be there. You have to talk to your compliance department to see what you can do to maximize that, to make sure that that goes for in your favor. Kirk, when you go, we talk about this a lot. So you just traveled to the States a little while ago, right? And you were trying to find places for your family to eat. I'm assuming that things like Yelp and Google played into the fact of where you guys chose to go eat. Is that fair?
Google, yes. Yelp. Well, I don't know, because my wife was the co-pilot. That was her job, to be honest.
We should probably bring her in and ask her what she
I don't think she was very happy. Well, we're looking for vegan restaurants,
Right.
and it was not easy going through the Appalachians, West Virginia, and some of it was very difficult.
But if you're in a new city, now I do this all the time because I travel a lot, here at ProudMouth for conferences. The first thing that I'm doing is I'm Yelping and I'm looking for their reviews, right? I'm looking at what the people say. And I think, I don't know if you told me this or somebody else I'm close to told me this, that they read the first 2 positive reviews and the last 2 negative reviews. So they can really see what the contrast is. But guess what? Google is Googling you regardless if you want the Googling to happen or not. So you need to get in front of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Any opportunity, search is still a big thing. It's weird. It seems to be not as popular right now, or maybe that's just me. I know there's people talking about it, marketing professionals, not all of them, but it is huge. One of the things that we take a lot of pride in is from an SEO standpoint is when we're pushing the agenda of authentic content, which really drives SEO. So you've got an advantage if you're doing your own content, but just optimize things. So in particular, we're talking about your My Business page, not SEO in general, but they're both really important. But yeah, if you can get that done, it's just one more thing that is pretty front and center that's going to come up, because they're going to look for your address. So, and they're or learn about you. But I think most advisors have ratings turned off or reviews turned off, correct? Or can you not do that?
No, Google won't let you. I mean, there are ways to get around it, but it's going to be there regardless if you really want it or not. I mean, I think there are ways to do it, but it's not easy, nor is it intuitive. But the goal is to make the internet work for you. And I'm going to give you one more tip, and then Kirk, we're going to have to do the next thing in our next episode because we're over on time. And here it is. Go to ChatGPT or just go to the internet and type this question in. What searches do my niche search the internet for when it comes to my financial services practice? That
don't type in my niche because it doesn't know. Just to be clear, type in what your actual niche is. Describe it the best, as specific as you can. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you.
Just in case.
Yeah, please don't do that word for word. I should have said insert here is what I should have said.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you do that, then all of a sudden the internet is going to tell you what your ideal target market is always searching for. That's what you're going to put on your website. That's the questions that you're going to answer. That's what your content's going to be. That's what your podcast's going to be. That's what you're showing. That's what your social media posts are. Because if you become the person who's answering that question, which ProudMouth has done for the last, 7 years now, is we're answering a number of questions. One, how do you stop being the best kept secret? How do you go ahead and create a content marketing strategy that's compliant? What do you need to do to stop, rise above the noise and be your own loud? People actually search that stuff. And now that our language is becoming ubiquitous within the space, if you type in be your own loud into the internet, we come up, right? Rise above the noise, best kept secret. We come up because that's something that we've been working at for a really, really long time. Compliant content marketing strategy for advisors. There's all sorts of different things that we've been really working really hard to do. So Kirk, okay, we're already over on time.
Yeah, I wanted to
Closing
give
thoughts.
a preview just and then let you shut this down.
Okay.
So next show, we're going to talk about referrals. We're also going to talk about expanding your reach in 2 years and scaling up in year 3. We'll try to get that done in episode 3 of a 3-part series. If it becomes a 4-part series, it's likely my fault because Matt's lists were typically, he got through them quicker than I did. Although not as quickly as he makes it out that he's going to get through them. But
I just talk.
He does get through them.
You do, dude. That just seems faster, but it wasn't.
But we are going to have a part 3, maybe a part 4.
Yeah. Well,
and what we haven't talked about yet, as I smoke my, hit my microphone here, send it flying, is that we are going to document all this so that you can download it all. So we've already shared 30 different tactics that you want to be thinking about. We stopped numbering these, and I apologize for that. But we will get back to numbering maybe. Or
no,
not.
you were numbering. I stopped numbering because I skipped around. So that's all.
I didn't want to point any fingers. There's only 2 of us, so I figured our audience might pick up on that on their own. But since you mentioned it,
that was all me.
Yeah, you're so focused on answering the question, and well, that's the wonderful difference about having 2 people on a podcast is they do things differently.
For Kirk, this is Matt, and we'll see you for part 3 of a potentially 4-part mini series on the other side of the mic very soon. Thanks, everybody.